4 camp girls vanished without a sound in 2016. For 2 years, everyone believed the case had gone cold, until a lone hiker stumbled on an abandoned cabin deep in the woods. Inside was a filthy ID card belonging to one of the missing girls, and what investigators found next changed everything. In the summer of 2016, Camp Redwater was full, laughter ringing through pine trees, counselors shouting instructions at the lake, and kids chasing each other along dirt trails worn smooth by decades of footsteps. But one humid July night shattered its reputation forever. 4 girls, Kayla, Avery, Morgan, and Elise, vanished from Cabin 7 without leaving a single trace. Their belongings were untouched. Their shoes were lined neatly beside their bunks. The only thing missing was them. For 2 years the case tormented Pine Creek County. Investigators scoured every trail. Helicopters scanned miles of forest canopy. Search dogs picked up faint scents only to lose them near the old fire road. Rumors spread like wildfire: abductions, cult activity, wild animals, a deranged former ranger. But nothing ever stuck. Everything went cold. Until the morning a lone hiker stumbled upon something deep in the woods, something he never should have found. An abandoned cabin the forest had nearly swallowed. A filthy, mud-caked ID card lying face down on the floor. And on the back, still readable through grime and scratches, the next-of-kin phone number of one of the missing girls. A call was made. A family panicked. And within hours, U.S. investigators returned to the forest they once gave up on. Everything that followed changed the case forever. Ethan Clark didn't believe in mysteries. He hiked Redwater Forest every month and considered it a second home. But on August 11, 2018, he made a mistake. He followed a game trail too far north, deeper than the average hiker ever went. The woods were unnaturally quiet. The deeper he walked, the more he noticed things were wrong. Trees bent at strange angles. Moss growing over what looked like old construction beams. And then he saw it, a shadowed outline hidden behind overgrown vines. A cabin. It shouldn't have been there. This section of forest had been declared untouched land for over 30 years. Still, curiosity pulled him in. The door hung crooked, barely attached. Inside smelled of rot and stale air. Rusted tins lay scattered across the floor. A blanket stiff with dirt rested on a broken cot. But something else glinted near the far corner. A plastic rectangle. Ethan picked it up and turned it over. A camp ID card. Kayla Mentor, Cabin 7, Camp Redwater. He froze. Kayla was one of the 4 missing girls. But what made his stomach drop wasn't the ID. It was the back, faded, cracked, but still readable. Emergency contact. Call Mentor family. Ethan pulled out his phone with trembling hands. He knew this wasn't something he could ignore. When the Mentor family saw an unknown number flash across their screen, they didn't expect anything but spam. But the moment Ethan said the words, "I found something belonging to your daughter," the world around them collapsed again. They called U.S. authorities immediately. Within hours, search teams, crime scene analysts, forest rangers, and federal investigators were flown in. It was the largest mobilization since the original disappearance. Reporters swarmed Pine Creek before officials could even brief the sheriff's department. Detective Erin Hale, who had lived with this case like a ghost chained to her chest, returned to the forest with a determination sharper than grief. She stood in front of the cabin Ethan found and stared at it like she had seen a monster. "This wasn't here in 2016, she murmured. "Are you sure?" one ranger asked. "I searched this section myself. This structure was not on the map, and it wasn't standing." Her eyes tightened. Someone built this. And someone used it. Inside, forensic teams collected everything: dust samples, soil analysis, fingerprints, shoe impressions, wood fibers, fragments of torn fabric. But the ID card was the first solid lead in 2 years. For Aaron, it was enough to reignite the case. For someone else, it was enough to panic. Investigators began by analyzing the cabin structure. The wood was newer than expected, cut only 8 to 12 years prior. But deeper samples told another story. The foundation beams were much older, from an earlier cabin burned down decades ago. Someone rebuilt it. Someone who knew the forest well. But why here? And why the girls? The floorboards in the back room revealed faint scratches, small, parallel, panicked scratches. A forensic specialist found hair strands behind them. Human. Brown. Long. Kayla had brown hair. The team pressed deeper into the woods, following subtle clues left behind. Broken branches, unusual patches of disturbed soil, improvised paths that didn't exist before the disappearance. Then, 400 yards west of the cabin, they found something that chilled them more than the cabin itself. A rope. Frayed. Tied between 2 trees. Not recent, weathered from years of exposure. A child-height trap or restraint point. The forest wasn't just a hiding place. It had been used. On the 3rd day of searching, a K-9 unit alerted to something underground. The dogs circled a cluster of pines repeatedly until investigators noticed the soil ring, a perfect outline of a buried object. They dug for hours. A door emerged. A cellar door, completely camouflaged under dirt and leaves. Inside was a cramped underground room, no bigger than a child's bedroom. The flashlight beams cut across chaotic carvings on the walls, initials, tally marks, desperate phrases scratched by fingernails. "We want to go home. Please stop. Day 7. Day 12. Detective Aaron Hale swallowed hard. If the girls were ever here, this place held their fear. The team found 2 hairbrushes, a torn camp sweatshirt, a shoe with Morgan's name written inside, 4 small blankets stacked in a corner. But one detail stood out. The cellar had been abandoned for years, yet a set of footprints in dried mud suggested someone visited it at least once after 2017. Someone came back. Someone who thought the case was forgotten. As investigators mapped the area, something horrifying became clear. The cabin and cellar weren't isolated. They were part of a network. 7 structures, some buried, some hidden under camouflage sheets, some disguised as hunting blinds, formed a rough circle. Each contained clues. A cracked water bottle with Avery's name. A sleeping bag that tested positive for Elisa's DNA. A notebook filled with incoherent ramblings. Old canned food. Rope fibers. Fire pits with charred bones, animal. 2 Polaroid films too damaged to restore. The girls had been moved around. Whoever held them knew how to survive in the forest. How to avoid detection. How to erase tracks while leaving just enough behind. Detective Hale felt something she hadn't felt since the case began. They were close. And that meant the person responsible might be watching. On the 4th night of the investigation, a motion-activated camera caught something. A figure. Tall. Thin. Wearing what looked like an old ranger jacket. Standing between 2 trees. Still. Silent. Watching the investigators work. By the time the team reached the location, he was gone. But footprints were found. Large boot prints, older but deep enough to show he carried weight. Forest rangers recognized the pattern. A rare boot used by wildfire crews. Manufactured before 2000. Only a small number of people in the region ever wore them. One of them was a former ranger who disappeared years earlier after being dismissed for mental instability. He had lived in the woods. He knew every trail. And his old personnel file revealed something investigators never noticed before. He once worked as maintenance staff at Camp Redwater. He knew Cabin 7. He knew the girls' routines. He knew the forest better than anyone. But that wasn't the worst part. He had a personal relationship with someone on the camp staff, someone who had been interviewed in 2016 and dismissed as irrelevant. This changed everything. Investigators followed a newly discovered trail leading toward a ravine miles from the main search area. The path was narrow, cut intentionally between thick brush. Broken twigs showed recent passage. Halfway down the ravine, they found a shallow cave sealed with wooden beams. Inside were personal belongings. Elisa's bracelet, Avery's shoe, Morgan's water bottle, Kayla's hair ribbon, all grouped together. But no human remains. No bodies. Just objects. Detective Hale whispered. He kept souvenirs. The cave also had a message burned into the wood. I kept them safe. You never looked. Investigators believed the girls were kept alive for some time after their disappearance, but how long remained unclear. The final clue came from a rusted metal tin containing a torn page from a camp handbook. A date scribbled on the corner. April 2017. Nearly a year after the disappearance. Someone had survived. Or all of them had, until that point. The discovery of the cabin, cellar, hand-built structures, and personal items shattered Pine Creek County. The forest had held secrets that no one ever imagined, secrets that could have changed everything if discovered earlier. But the darkest truth was the one investigators refused to voice publicly. The girls hadn't vanished into thin air. They hadn't wandered off. They hadn't been taken by wildlife or swallowed by the woods. They had been held, moved, hidden, and watched. For months, maybe years. And the person responsible, a man once sworn to protect those same woods, knew exactly how to keep the world blind. His knowledge of the terrain, his access to old ranger stations, his connection to the camp, and his isolation allowed him to weave a nightmare right under everyone's nose. The hiker's discovery broke open what investigators thought was long buried. But the truth is, cases like this never end cleanly. Some evidence was clear, some was lost to time, and some questions may never be answered. What happened in those forgotten corners of Redwater Forest still haunts every investigator who stepped foot there. Because now they know. The forest remembers. And somewhere out there, the watcher might still be walking beneath the trees.